will be a free agent in 2021, and then we'll see what happens, if he wants to go and team up with Jimmy Butler in Miami, or if he goes to Golden State and kind of replaces Kevin Durant, makes that a super team again. I mean, he's going to have options, and it's going to be interesting. But shout out to the Heat. I mean, this team is so good, and Jimmy Butler and his coffee company are proving everybody wrong. I think that Jay Crowder and Andre Iguodala, those two veteran additions, huge. Dragic is channeling his Phoenix days, and, they just look great. I mean, game one of the East Finals are on during this recording, and, Boston kind of overtook the lead here, and they're up, so maybe we'll still be doing the show when that game ends. But, yeah, I mean, how about that Celtics-Raptors series that ended up going 7? Game 6 on Thursday night, that double overtime classic. I didn't want it to end. It was such a good game.
Unbelievable.
And, I mean, the Celtics, look, they're really well coached. They're doing all this without Gordon Hayward. Tatum's been fantastic. Kemba's been great. Jalen's been great. Tice has been really good. And it was just a really good series between two division rivals. And I think the focus is on this, unlike the Bucks shortcomings. It's the Raptors played their hearts out. They were the defending champs. They were down in Florida from June, and they just ran out of gas. Kyle Lowry, I think, was dinged up. Fred VanVleet is going to make a lot of money this summer in free agency. So I think the focus is more on how well the Celtics played, but the Raptors, I mean, hats off to them. That was a hell of a series.
Yeah, absolutely. The Celtics were the better team, and the Raptors gutted that series out. They really, really played so hard throughout the whole series. The only thing for the Raptors that was just, I don't know if you felt this watching this. You mentioned him earlier, but man, Marc Gasol looks washed, Jason. I mean, he could not hang in that series. And there was a point at the end, you could see Nurse kind of in game 6 was just like, I almost can't play this guy. And Ibaka's injured, so they go small in game 6. But, he kind of killed them. And it has made me think I'm not giving the Heat enough credit, because one of the things that I forget who says, I think it's Kevin Arnovitz, who's an ESPN guy. He says how valuable it is to just not have anywhere to attack on defense. And I kind of think the corollary to that is having 5 guys who can all shoot and do things on offense is the same way. When you can't just leave a guy, it's really, really beneficial. And I think that the one thing with the Raptors that hurt them was both of those things, really. Like, they didn't have an elite creator on offense. And then on defense, like, I think Gasol kind of got taken advantage of at stretches. But Nurse he coached as well as you can coach in a series that you lose. He just got an extension, well-deserved. I mean, hats off, as you said, to the Raptors. And really interesting to see if they bring back VanVleet. Because they're also a Giannis suitor. Many have said that they and Miami are 2 of the favorites if he leaves Milwaukee.
Yeah, I mean, Miami, they're putting a team together. Like, they are going to get somebody really good. So you have to hope these contenders all play well, because if these players start to get disgruntled, it's going to be over. I mean, it's kind of funny. The Atlantic Division all knocked each other out. The Raptors swept the Nets. The Sixers swept the Celtics. I mean, the Celtics swept the Sixers. You would have liked it to have been the other way around. And then these two teams just put on a great show. And, I mean, obviously, we'll get to player movement later on, but I was listening to the Old Man and the Three podcast with JJ Redick, and they had Kevin Durant. They had Kevin Durant on. And, he was talking about, because people are still giving him crap for leaving the Thunder for the Warriors in 2016. And he's like, the modern era of players staying on one team their whole career is over. He basically said, if you're a fan, enjoy the runs your team is on, because players like to move around. The Celtics actually started that in 2008. They put 3 guys together who all ran their own franchises, brought them together, won a championship. Then the Heat followed suit. The Lakers tried and failed, and then the Warriors came together, and the Cavs. I mean, it's just a star-driven league. And, you're going to get these 2-3 year windows where players team up. If they win, great. If not, they'll go elsewhere and form a new super team. I mean, this is the NBA now. And that's why I give the Celtics and the Raptors that much more credit, because neither of them are considered super teams. The Raptors lost Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green, and they ended up going 7 games in the semifinals. The Celtics, where Hayward's been an all-star, Tatum's a legitimate superstar, and you can make the case for Kemba too, but they're not a super team. They're just, both of the Celtics and the Raptors are really well put together teams, very well coached, and that's what you saw in that series.
Yeah, and speaking of super teams and speaking of a few of the guys you mentioned, Kevin Durant, I want to switch gears here really quickly, go to the Western Conference in our last post-mortem. But first, I want to ask you something that came up. I have a group chat with some NBA buddies of mine from college, and I asked the question. So obviously, we see Houston has Westbrook and Harden, and obviously James Harden got traded to the Rockets. Um,
Well, they both technically got traded to the Rockets.
that is true. I posed the counterfactual. Let's say that instead of trading James Harden, they traded Russell Westbrook to the Celtics a year before the Nets made their trade. And instead of that, the Celtics get Russell Westbrook and the Thunder receive KG and Paul Pierce in that
I don't
trade.
think that. I don't
Does
know if
that
they would
team
have
win
signed
titles?
off. I don't know if they would have signed off on that deal. Because then what? Paul Pierce and Kevin Durant played the same position. They were both at the 3. Then who's playing point guard? Reggie Jackson. I mean, you would have had Harden.
You'd have Reggie Jackson. You'd have James Harden.
Durant. It wouldn't have worked.
Pierce and KG. And then
No.
you'd have Perk as your backup. I mean,
it would. They tried because it was the East. The West was still too good then because you had the Spurs, you had the
and
Lakers.
Ibaka.
I mean,
They would have had Ibaka too, man.
yeah, but it wouldn't have fit. I don't think it would have fit. I mean, I would have loved for that to happen because then the Nets wouldn't have been in the hellhole they were in the last 5 years.
Yeah, maybe Paul Pierce is coming off the bench on that team. I think maybe something like that happens. I mean, he ended up doing that. I mean, he started kind of for the Nets, but he didn't play that many minutes. I don't know. I was just thinking, that team wins titles, doesn't it? Like, don't you think that team has to win at least one title? Like Kevin Durant, James Harden, and those guys, man.
I'm skeptical because you still had the Heat, the big 3, Bosh, Wade, and LeBron, and you still had the Spurs in the West. And remember the Lakers tried. They had Kobe and Powell, and they had Steve Nash and Dwight Howard and Ron Artest, a.k.a. Metta World Peace, come in, and they fizzled out. I mean, you never know. That's why you play the games. And that before we move to the West, that's just reminding me, we're looking at a Heat Celtics Eastern Conference Finals, right? And it doesn't have the pizzazz that it did when it was KG, Pierce, and Ray Allen, and LeBron, Wade, and Bosh. But it's still kind of cool. Like, this is next generation Heat Celtics. I mean, it's been a rivalry. They're both championship organizations, and it's ushering in a new era, with Butler and Bam and Kemba and Tatum. But with the Bucks losing, I'm going to say this, now that they don't look like world beaters, the East is wide open next year. Wide open. And that's good for the
Nets fan Jason Goldstein, very excited about the wide open Eastern Conference and his chance of his Nets going. But at any rate, so we don't bury the lead here. I said all that to say this. I have closed the book in my mind that Russell Westbrook can be the second best player on a championship team. That book is closed. That book has closed for me. They could not win in Oklahoma City with him as the second best player, and they had other guys. It was not just him. They had Ibaka. They had Steven Adams. They had Reggie Jackson. They had the teams with Kevin Martin. They could not win a title with him as the second best player then. They can't win a title with him as the second best player now. I don't think he can be the second best player on your team. And, I think it requires a very special thing for him to be at this stage in his career. I think it's getting to be a special situation that makes him a big plus of a player. He needs the ball a lot. He needs to have shooting surrounding him. And frankly, he's just not as good on defense as advertised. And, that really ties in with why the Rockets lost the series, because James Harden did not have enough help. Now, was James Harden the best player on the floor for most of these games? No. Let's put it out there. Let's be real about this. He got outplayed on multiple games by Anthony Davis and LeBron James, but Russell Westbrook was terrible, Jason. There were games where he was a negative for the Rockets. Like, him on the floor was bad for their team. And that is a huge problem for them now and going forward.
Look, this is not a hot take. Russell Westbrook is a losing player. He's great. He had that one fun MVP year where he carried the Thunder, after Durant left.
First round loss.
He was looked at as a hero. Yeah. He's not a winning player. He's a stat stuffer. He's going to go to the Hall of Fame. He's got 20,000 points. Great electric player to watch. When it comes to winning, what were the Rockets thinking trading Clint Capella? you need a big man to win in today's NBA. And then their other big man, Daniel House, got pretty much kicked out of the bubble because he let one of the testers in his room, allegedly. The guy's married. Like, you couldn't wait another week or two for your series to be over? Like, go home. Like, so he ended up going home, and they didn't have a big. I mean, Covington played all right. I would say P.J. Tucker was the most consistent player on the Rockets in that series. And
Covington was great for them in that series.
Yeah, he was great too, but they're not in any of those games without P.J. Tucker. P.J. Tucker is a multi-dimensional player.
For sure.
Unbelievable that this man was only getting paid $8 million a year. He's going to cash in big time. But the Rockets are about to get tied up. They already have Harden and Westbrook under contract. They're going to have to pay P.J. Tucker if they want to contend in the West, which we believe that all 15 teams think they have a chance going into next season. So they have their work cut out for them to improve this roster. There's really not much ground for it. They still owe Eric Gordon a ton of money. And then how are you filling out the rest of this roster? Look, I think Chris Paul revitalized himself in that run with the Thunder.
This is right where I was going to go.
If him and Harden had a better relationship off the court, they were better off not making that deal, even though Westbrook and Harden were friends.
1,000,000%. I literally could not agree with you more. I think when you take this, it's really hard not to go to that place and say, this team this year would have been better with Chris Paul. Full stop. Full stop. That's it. That's all you need to say. They are a legitimate title contender with Chris Paul in that spot. Like, look at the way that the Lakers played them. Chris Paul would have obliterated them if they played that kind of defensive coverage. And yes, James Harden continues to kind of wilt from the moment. I mean, I think we've seen a lot on that too. Like, he's a guy who's there. I mean, this is the reality. This is why I say, I mean, you almost wonder if they would have been better off in Oklahoma City originally with Harden and Durant, just because it seems like Harden kind of is almost better suited to be the number 2 than the number 1. He likes to defer.
Broke that team up way too early. They're trying to bring back the magic from 2012. With 2 of the 3. It doesn't work. It's not working. And now that D'Antoni's gone, I mean, who wants that job?
I don't know. I don't know where this team goes. They have the guys locked up, so I mean, they're going to run it back for the most part next year. I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to see what this team is. I mean, all the major pieces are locked in. Harden's locked in on a supermax. Russell Westbrook's on a supermax. Eric Gordon has a long-term deal. Robert Covington's locked up for 2 more years. P.J. Tucker only has 1 more year. Daniel House, I mean, the thing that's crazy is how much they miss Daniel House. You alluded to it. But all that's to say, I mean, this team's going to run it back. And I don't know. I mean, I'm never going to count out Daryl Morey. But, man, that Chris Paul trade looks brutal right now, Jason. So, I mean, we can't talk that much about the Lakers. Obviously, great series by them. They're the team who I have to say I think is going to win the title. I was even impressed with them during the seeding games. I thought their defense looked really good in those games, even though their offense struggled. They found the thing that they need to do in this series against the Rockets, which is playing smaller with Davis at the 5, LeBron at the 4. I think they have to be odds-on favorites at this point to win the title by a good margin. They have LeBron, they have AD, and they just play together. I mean, I don't know what more there is to say for the Lakers. They're very, very good. They have 2 of maybe the top 5 players in the league. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, is there anything else to really say for the Western Conference? We can't really preview the Western Conference Finals because we don't know who's going to be in it. But do you have anything else for this series before we move to the East?
I'm stupid for picking against them. I said Blazers in 7. I did think they were going to beat Houston. But now, like, I can't pick the series because I'm still holding out that the Clippers will win tonight and get to the finals somehow. They're too deep. I think they're a deeper team than the Lakers, although they don't match up particularly well against one another. I think the advantage does go to the Lakers. But, yeah, I mean, they lost Game 1, both their series, and they just, picked up Game 2, and boom, off to the races. The other thing is, like, they were eliminated Friday. So now LeBron and company have been sitting around for 4 or 5 days in Orlando. They're not home. They're not in the comfort of L.A. They are just waiting around for this Game 7 series. So we'll see if the rest does them any good or does them any bad. But after we're done recording, man, we are in for an exciting Game 7. And I think before we go, we should at least give our predictions for the Eastern Conference Finals.
Oh, man. By the time this gets, I mean,
we got lucky. It was about to be over, and it went into overtime. Jimmy Butler hit a big 3.
Oh wow.
So we have 4 minutes and 24 seconds to solidify our prediction.